Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. I swear to Allah, until my last breath, I will remember Hussein. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. I swear to Allah, you have shown us so much courage through the pain. You sacrifice your family and walk you thirsty. Oh Hussein, you gave everything for Allah. Never did you complain. I swear to Allah, until my last breath, I will remember Hussein. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. I swear to Allah, until my last breath, I will remember Hussein. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. I swear to Allah, whenever I face troubles in my life, I close my eyes and see your shrine and call awake every time. Oh Hussein, you're the love of my heart. You are the light of my eyes. I swear to Allah, until my last breath, I will remember Hussein. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. Oh Hussein, you live forever in our hearts and in our minds. Muhammad wa ala Muhammad salawat Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are nearing the end of this Muharram series, and today we'll look at the events that took place after the day of Ashura. So we'll look at everything that took place after Imam Hussain was killed. Right? So in the Quran, Allah, He speaks about people who fight in the way of Allah. And He says that the believers are the ones who fight the friends of Shaitan. And we see here that, Yazid was a friend of Shaitan, because everything that he was doing was wrong, and he was fighting the grandson of the Holy Prophet. Right? And it was Imam Hussain, he stood up to him because Yazid was a friend of Shaitan, and we see all of that happen in Karbala. And Allah also says in the Quran that Shaitan's strategy is very weak, and we'll see that today after looking at the events of today and what happened at the end. We'll see how Shaitan's strategy, that is Yazid's strategy, it was so weak, right? And at the end, Yazid lost, right? Because the strategy was so weak, he lost, and it was Imam Hussain who was victorious. So we look at that today, and so let's move on to talking about what happened after Imam Hussain was killed. Right after Imam Hussain was killed, Yazid's army didn't just stop there. Right, what they did was they sent some men with their horses. They asked them to run over the body of Imam Hussain, and Imam Hussein's body was trampled, right? And they didn't even let Imam Hussain and his companions' bodies to be buried. They didn't even let them do that. When they themselves, the people who had died from Yazid's army, they were all respectfully buried. But Imam Hussain, who is the grandson of the Holy Prophet, he was treated with so much disrespect, right? And he was left unburied on the land of Karbala. And not only that, after his body was trampled, Imam Hussain and all of the shuhada, everybody who was made shaheed, their heads were cut off from their body and they were put on spears, right? And then this was taken and showed to everyone on the streets of Kufa and Sham, which is where the caravan of Imam Hussain was taken after Karbala. And we look at that today. Right, so on the night after the day of Ashura, right? So when Imam Hussain was killed, the night following that night is called Sham-E-Ghariba, which also means the night of the strangers, right? So on that night, right, the family of Imam Hussain, the women and the children that were left, they lost everything. They lost all of their family members on that day. But despite that, Yazid's army, after that, what they did was they entered the tents of Imam Hussein's family. They went in and they robbed everything, right? They robbed everything that they could find, all of all of their belongings and everything. And then they set the tents on fire, right? So all of the tents were set on fire, and the women and children, they were running from one tent to another, trying to save themselves, right? So imagine there's so many children. Remember we talked about this when we spoke about Sayyida Sakina, right? There's so many children, there are so many women, and all of them, they were trying to save themselves from the fire. And there was also Imam Zainul Abidin, who was our fourth Imam, who was very, very sick during this event of Karbala, right? And that's why he didn't fight. He was very sick, and Sayyida Zainab had to go into a burning tent to save the Imam. And so this is what the army of Yazid did after the day of Ashura. So on that night, on the night of Sham-E-Ghariba, all these women and children, they had to sleep in the cold. They had no tents. It was dark, and that night they spent in cold. There was no, they were hungry and thirsty, and that's how all of these children, they spent that night. And that's why that night is called Sham-E-Ghariba, the night of strangers, right? Everything was taken from that on that night. And the next day, what happened was, Yazid didn't stop there, right? He did all of this, and then on the next day, all the women and children, they were tied together. They were tied with ropes together, and they were, mounted on camels and then taken from Karbala on a very long and hard journey. And Imam Zainul Abidin, as I said, he was very sick, right? Despite that he was so ill, he was, it says, we find in the narrations that an iron collar was put around his neck, and he was forced to walk all the way to Kufa and Sham, because this is where Yazid's army was taking all of the women, children, and Imam Zainul Abidin. Right, so they didn't care. They didn't care of all the pain and the loss that this family of Imam Hussain is going through. So as you can see in the picture there, you can see all the camels and all of that's how they were taken, right? And when they were tied to each other, so imagine if someone is really short, and if it's a child and there's a grown-up who's quite tall, and they're all tied to each other with ropes. So if one person, moves or stands up, the other person who is also attached with the rope would be, hurt by that as well. So it was very difficult, and it was a very long journey. So they were all tied together, and that's how they were taken on this journey. They were taken as prisoners. And when they left, this is how cruel the army of Yazid was. When they left, they made this caravan of Imam Hussain. They passed through the land where all the shaheeds, the unburied people from, all unburied companions, and Imam Hussein was lying on the land of Karbala. They were taken through that so that they saw, the bodies of their beloved family members. Sayyidah Sakina, she saw her father lying there. So imagine how they would have felt. And they did that on purpose. The army of Yazid, they did that on purpose. And in front of them, while they were going in front of this, in front of the caravan of Imam Hussein, were Yazid's army. They were holding up the heads of the shuhada on spears, right? So that's how their journey started from Karbala to Kufa and then to Sham. And so the army of Yazid, they were telling everyone that, we have won, and these people, they are prisoners, and and they were showing to everyone, like, look at how victorious we are. And so that's how it all happened. But throughout all of this, the family of Imam Hussein, they always remained very strong and steadfast, right? They never, their faith in Allah, it never faltered, right? They never thought, why is Allah doing this to us? They never complained. They were always so strong and brave. And on their journey, remember, like I said, it's a very long journey, right? So on their journey, they met lots of people. And every time anybody would ask them who they were, they would, say that Zainab and Imam Zain al-Abidin, they would tell these people that, we are the family of the Ahl al-Bayt. This is what happened to us. This is what happened in Karbala. And, slowly people started to find out what has happened to the family of the Holy Prophet. And how cruelly Imam Hussein and everybody was made shaheed in Karbala. So people started to learn, and slowly, when this news started to spread, Muslims started to become angry, and when they learned of what has happened, so they started to find out, and they started to become angry. And when they were taken to the palace of Yazid, and in Kufa as well. So in Kufa and in Sham, which is Damascus, when they were taking there in the palaces, Imam Zain al-Abidin and Sayyidah Zainab, they gave such powerful speeches, right? They talked about everything that has happened to them and everything bad that Yazid and his army has done. And everybody, would listen to these speeches because they were so strong and powerful that it would make people cry. It would make people cry when they heard of what has happened to these. And they started to find out that, Yazid, he has done such cruel things. And Yazid's not the person that he claims to be. They slowly started to find out about the character of Yazid. And so that's why these speeches that Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Zain al-Abidin gave, they had such an important role in spreading the message of Imam Hussein. So they told everybody that this is what Imam Hussein stood up for. So when we read about the tragedies of Karbala, when we look at it, okay, it may seem that, Imam Hussein lost and Yazid won, because Imam Hussein and his companions, they were all made shaheed, and Yazid was alive, and Imam Hussein's family was made to go through so much, and they were taken as prisoners, and they were put into prison. So it seems like, because this happened, Yazid has won, but that's not true at all. The reason why we say, the reason why we can say that Imam Hussein has won is because Imam Hussein, he achieved his goal, right? What was Imam Hussein's mission? Right? He refused to give allegiance to Yazid because he wanted to save Islam. He wanted to, he didn't want to, for a person like Yazid to, be making up his own Islam. And so Imam Hussein stood up for the sake of Allah. And And that's what happened. Imam Hussain achieved that mission, right? He achieved his mission of, he never gave his allegiance to Yazid, and he was able to save Islam because, like I said, people started to find out. People started to find out what the kind of person that Yazid actually is, right? And because people saw that nobody would stand up against Yazid and his followers, or challenge him, but Imam Zain al-Abidin and Sayyida Zainab, they were doing that. And so people start to sense that there is something wrong, and eventually when even in after they spread that message on their journey to Kufa and Sham and in the palace of Yazid and his followers, when they went back to Medina, Sayyida Zainab and Imam Zain al-Abidin started to tell everybody. They went back to Medina and told all the Muslims of what happened and what Yazid had done and what Imam Hussein's message was. And so slowly everybody started to become aware of Yazid's oppression, and they started to protest against him. They rebelled and protested against Yazid because they found out what his true character was, and that he wasn't actually following Islam. And through that, very, very soon after that, because all of the Muslims, they started to stand up against Yazid, soon the family and the power of Yazid was destroyed. Right? So Yazid, he never got that power and money that he was after, because 3 years after he killed Imam Hussain, just 3 years after he died himself, right? So he didn't even live that long to, the power and money that he was after, he never got that because he didn't even live that long, and his power and everything was soon destroyed because everybody found out of what happened. Right, so we can also see that here, like this is the haram of Imam Hussain, right? And we have the shrine of Imam Hussain, and even 1400 years after the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, everybody still remembers Imam Hussein's sacrifice, and he is looked at as a role model for standing up for the truth and standing up in the way of Allah. Right? Millions of people go for ziyarat to Karbala, to the shrine of Imam Hussain, right? Millions of people. And what about Yazid? No one remembers Yazid as a good person. Nobody knows anything about, Yazid, or where, where he is and, what happened to him. People only remember Yazid as a cruel person, as a criminal who killed the grandson of the Holy Prophet. So this shows us who truly won after the tragedy of Karbala, Imam Hussain or Yazid. It's definitely, right, Imam Hussain, because Imam Hussain achieved what he wanted, and we all still remember him and his sacrifice. Right, so that is our topic for today. Let's move on to doing a quick activity. Right, so again, just a few questions from what we learned about today. And so I want you to try and answer them, and I'll give you a few seconds after each question to try and give me the answer, right? So this is a multiple choice. What happened on Sham-E-Ghariba? Imam Hussain was martyred. The tents of Imam Hussein's caravan were set on fire, or the women and children were taken as captives to Kufa and Sham. Captives means prisoner, right? So that's another word. So what happened on Sham-E-Ghariba? So it is that the tents of Imam Hussein's caravan were set on fire. Yeah. All right, next one. The remaining members of Imam Hussein's caravan were free to go back home to Medina. Is that true or false? So after the day of Ashura, were the remaining members free to go back to Medina? It is false, right? They were taken as captives to Kufa and Sham. Right, so this is a fill in the blanks. Imam Dash and Sayyida dash reported the events of Ashura to as many people as they could. So which Imam? Imam Zain al-Abidin and Sayyida Zainab, right? They were the two main people who reported reported everybody of everything that happened in Karbala. All right. Fourth one. How many years after the tragedy of Karbala did Yazid die? 2 years, 10 years, 3 years, or 13 years? He died after 3 years, right? All right, so that's the end of our activity. So today we've looked at everything that's happened, right? We looked at everything that happened on the day of Ashura and then everything that happened after the day of Ashura. So what do we learn from that? What have we learned that we can use in our life? So what we saw is that in our life, we can't always control what happens to us. We can't control our circumstances, but we always have the freedom to choose how to react, right? Because nobody except for us can control the way we think and what we believe in. And this is exactly what the family of Imam Hussain showed us. They showed us true freedom. Because we saw all of the difficulties and the hardships that they went through, but they never gave up in Allah. There was never a point when Imam Hussein's family thought that let's just give up. There are so many struggles that we are going through. Let's just give in to Yazid and give him allegiance. No, they stood strong and they continued with the mission of Imam Hussain. Because yes, they were forced to go as prisoners, but they could never be forced to change what they believed in. They continued to stand for the truth and they continued to stand against Yazid because they knew that this is the right path and we are doing this for the happiness of Allah and Allah is with us. And that's exactly what we can learn from as well. Because in our life, difficult things happen too, right? Where we are faced with difficult situations and it can be quite hard to deal with them. For example, at school, our friends, they can often force us to do things that we don't want to do, or, we know that this is wrong and Allah is not going to be happy with us. And at those moments, it can be quite difficult, but never let anyone pressurize you in doing anything that you don't believe in, anything that this is wrong. Even if it becomes really hard. For example, you're bullied. Someone's bullying you in school for your faith and for what you're doing, such as if you're wearing hijab to school and other kids are making fun of you. It can be a really hard moment. You might think, oh, everyone's making fun of me. I don't want to wear a hijab to school anymore. Or for example, you have your friends who are listening to music and they're forcing you to listen to music as well. And it can get very difficult to say no to them. But at that time, remember Imam Hussain, remember the struggles that he went through, but he never gave up and he continued to do what was right. So at that time, what you can think is, who am I doing this for? Who am I, making happy? I'm doing this for Allah. I'm doing this to make Allah happy. And Allah is with me. He is watching me. No, it's not easy. It can be very hard, but you're doing this for Allah and you're staying on the right path and you're staying strong, just like how Imam Hussain and his family stayed strong in Karbala and in the journey after Karbala. Right? So hopefully we can learn this from today and try to make our faith in Allah even stronger. So that is it for today. I just want to remind you of the pledge that we made this afternoon. So if you remember, we talked about trying to start one small good deed from today till Arba'een, so that we can bring a change in our life starting from today. So hopefully we can all do that. We can pick a good deed that we want to start from today. All right, so this was the last talk in this series. I really hope you enjoyed this Muharram series, and there was something that you were able to learn from in these past 10 days. Thank you so much for watching and listening in. Khuda Hafiz.